hello all my friends, welcome back or welcome to the channel. If you're joining us for the first time, I'm T and this is my YouTube channel, Simplicity S9468 Sewing. So in today's video, I'm going to be sharing with you two things. So the first, I'm going to share with you how to line an unlined jacket pattern. So there have been a few requests on the channel for this specific tutorial, and so I will share with you how to line an unlined jacket with Simplicity S9468. The second thing that I'm going to be sharing with you today is a sewing tutorial of Simplicity S9468. So we are going to do a sew along of View B. This is the variation with the notched collar and the oversized pockets on the front of the front jacket here, and it also has a cuff at the bottom. So I will tell you all the pattern pieces you need for this, so stay tuned for that. Let's get into the materials that you're going to need for this project. So starting with the pattern, you will need a copy of the Simplicity S9468. If you want to trace your pattern pieces, which I highly suggest, I would suggest getting some sketching or tracing paper. Also a pair of scissors. Make sure that you use your paper scissors for your paper and your fabric scissors for your fabric. So you should have two sets of scissors. A curved ruler. So I have this Dritz curved ruler here. And then you want a straight angle ruler. And then you want either a pencil or a very thin pen so that you can trace your pattern pieces. Okay, so let me tell you the pattern pieces that you need for this pattern. So once you cut all your pattern pieces, double check to make sure you have all your pattern pieces. So you're going to go ahead and count from 1 to 10 to make sure that all those pattern pieces are there. And then once you did that, go ahead and look for these pattern pieces. So we need the front, which is number 1 here. We also need the pocket, which is number 2. We need the loop, that is number 3. We need the back, which is number 4. We also need piece number 5, the front facing. That's this piece here. We also need number 6, which is the back facing. That's piece 6 here. We also need piece number 7, which is the sleeve. Piece number 8, that is the sleeve band. And lastly, we need piece number 9, that is the collar here. So those are all the pattern pieces that we need for this project. And let's go ahead, trace out our size and our pattern pieces, and let's get to work. So we're going to go ahead and create the lining for the garment, and we're going to use the front, back, front facing, and back facing patterns to do that. So we're going to go ahead and start with piece number 4, which is the back. And it is really wise for you to do all of your adjustments and alterations before you do this step. So if you want to shorten your waistline, so I shorten my waistline by 1 inch, make sure you do that. I also did a forward shoulder adjustment. You'll see my 1/2 inch forward shoulder adjustment. And then I also shortened my shoulder line as well, and I brought my shoulder line in. So those are the adjustments. Those are some standard adjustments that I make when I'm making jackets or blazers. So if you need to make any of your adjustments, make sure you do that before creating your lining. So the first thing we need to do is we need to trace out our back facing. So this is the back facing, and as you can see, I traced my back facing based off of my final pattern that has all the adjustments on it, because remember, you want to make sure you have all your adjustments so that way your facing pieces will match your lining and your front and back pattern pieces. So I'm just going to line this up here so you can see it real clearly. Now you'll notice for this pattern, the back is cut twice, so you want to pay attention to that. And the facing is cut on fold. So you want to make sure that you stitch that lining in the back. So you need to have that back center seam, otherwise the measurements won't add up when you go to put your garment together. So go ahead and trace out your back facing here, and let me show you a trick on how you can get the right curve here. So this is the original pattern piece before all of the adjustments. So I just laid the pattern piece on top of the transparent piece of paper, and underneath the transparent piece of paper is my back pattern piece. And then I took that pattern and I went ahead and I outlined the fold here. So this edge here is the fold of the back facing. So I went ahead and I drew my first line. And then after that, I marked below at the edge of the facing here. And you'll notice that because I made my adjustments, the pattern does not line up. So what you have to do here, if you make adjustments, you have to go ahead and tilt your pattern and go ahead and draw in that line. Move your pattern piece up. Draw your line across the shoulder line here, and then also down the side here. And then you'll get your pattern piece, your new pattern piece for your back facing. Make sure you mark it and make any indications for size. And if this is your final piece, maybe you want to put an asterisk on it or something like that, just to notate so you know this is the pattern piece that you're going to be using. So now we need to create our seam allowance. Now you can give yourself however much seam allowance you want, but I am going to give myself a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance because that's the standard and that's what I can remember. So go ahead and mark your seam allowance. Okay, so now we have our new facing piece that match our back pattern piece here with its seam allowance. And now we can go ahead and cut that out. So in order to create the back lining, we're going to take our back facing and place it up at the neckline here. So we're going to match the neckline of the back facing to the neckline of the back pattern piece here, just like this. Make sure it's even and that your pattern piece match up, just like so. I'm going to go ahead and trace out our lining piece here. Now we want to start at this first line here because that's going to give us our seam allowance. Okay, so when you're done, your back lining should look something like this, and it should have a curve, and you have your seam allowance. So don't forget that's going to be your 3/8 inch seam allowance, and that is going to go on your back facing, is going to go on your lining here. In order for the back facing to fit the back lining, we need to take 5/8 inch from off the fold line here. You can either fold it or cut it. And that is your back pattern piece there. Back facing. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and create the lining for the front of the jacket pattern. We're going to start with piece number 5 and 1, and the only difference is for the front facing here for piece 5, we're not going to add seam allowance on this side here because it already has built-in seam allowance. So for this piece, the original design instructs you to turn this side piece under so that you can have a really nice finish on the inside. So instead of turning that piece under, we're going to attach it to the lining that we're going to create. So we don't need to create a 3/8 inch seam allowance for the facing, but we will create one for the lining, and I'll share with you how to do that here. So we're going to do the same thing we did for the back facing. We're going to go ahead and line up the front facing to the front here. We're going to go ahead and trace out this pattern piece, and we're going to add a 3/8 inch seam allowance to the lining itself, not to the facing. So we're going to go ahead and add our 3/8 inch seam allowance here, and then after we add our 3/8 inch seam allowance, we can go ahead and cut it out. Okay, so here's our back lining and our back facing. Now we have our collar, and our collar, we don't really have to do anything to it. And with your sleeve pattern, the sleeve pattern, you don't really have to do anything to it either. You just cut 2 pieces for your sleeve and 2 pieces for your lining. Your cuff will actually enclose your lining, and so you don't really need to do any additional adjustments or anything for your lining piece. Okay, so that is an easy way to create a back and front lining for the inside of a blazer jacket. So now we can go ahead and go to the next part, which is the fun part, and I'm going to share with you my fabrics, and we're going to go ahead and cut these pieces out, and we are going to sew a blazer.